Welcome back, everybody. And today we're going to be talking about loving a book so much that you started butchering 10 other books to glue pieces of them inside it. Yay! Um, you're reading atlases for maps, stripping portraits out of biographies, pasting in letters, ticket stubs, maybe the occasional scandalous print. Ooh, scandalous. By the time you're done, your neat little two-volume history has mutated into a 30-volume beast that needs its own shelf. Is this a crime against books or the greatest fan edition of all time? Welcome to the wonderful unhinged world of Grangerized books, also called extra illustrated books. Basically, these are hand-built Frankenstein volumes created by people with too much money, too many engravings, and absolutely no fear of scissors. And if you're into sprayed edges, tipped in art prints, and special editions with maps and ephemera, yeah, these are basically the chaotic 18th century ancestors of that instinct. Today we're going to talk about where this practice came from, how it actually worked, and why some people adored it, and why others called it a monstrous mania, and what it has to do with scrapbooks, altered books, fandom, and even how we read online today. Let's go ahead and pop into the screen share here. As soon as I could find the button, where'd it go? There it is. And we're sharing. Or attempting to. Ta-da. I'll make this a little bit bigger. Big, 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 big. Okay. So, looks like hand-painted stuff here. And down here, we're going to have some glued-in art piece. And another glued-in art piece here. And let's see here. So yeah, and those are like tipped in plates or blank leaves that people have altered to make it, I don't know, cooler. Um, so what is Grangerized extra illustrated books? A Grangerized or extra illustrated book is a published book that someone has customized after the fact by stuffing extra material into it. Engraved portraits and prints, like we've seen here on the share screen, maps and views, drawings and watercolors, photographs, handwritten letters, autographs, ticket stubs, playbills, random ephemera from the author's world or the collector's imagination. These are tipped in or mounted on blank or added leaves, and then the whole swollen thing is rebound so the new material runs alongside the text. You don't conjure this stuff from thin air. Traditionally, you get it by cutting up other books and print series. So the classic Grangerized volume is one book you can still see, built out of several books you can't anymore. And let me pull up another couple examples. Example one, there we go. And again, it is super tiny, so let me see if I can separate the images out here and blow them up slightly. Well, that's pretty good, but we'll make it even bigger. So yeah, so a lot of this as extra stuff that they've taken from other books and lacquered inside somehow, some way. And same for here, more watercolored illustrations. And to be honest, it looks pretty cool. Um, so yeah. Now, where does the name came from? Well, there was a gentleman called James Granger, the man who started it by accident. So who is Granger and why did he get turned into a verb? James Granger, born in 1723 and lived till 1776, was an English clergyman, biographer, and hardcore print nerd. In 1769, he published a biographical history of England from Egbert the Great to the Revolution. Few key, a few key things about it. It's a systematic catalog of notable English figures arranged to make its life easy for portrait collectors. He lists known portrait engravings of each person and where they appeared, basically an 18th century checklist app. Cool, analog. Many copies were issued with blank leaves or interleaves so readers could add notes or references. Here's the fun part. Granger himself never Grangerized a book. He kept his own 14,000 portrait prints neatly in portfolios. After he died, those got sold. The chaos started when readers got his book and thought, why keep the portraits separate when I could just glue them straight into the text? They started hunting down portraits of everyone mentioned, pasting them in at the relevant lines, adding more blank leaves, rebinding the whole thing into massively expanded sets. One famous result is the Bull-Granger, Richard Bull's copy of Granger's book, swollen with thousands of portraits across many volumes. That plus similar projects helped kick off a full-blown extra illustration craze. The word Grangerizing doesn't really take off until the late 19th century when people finally need a name for this wild hobby and retroactively blamed it all on James Granger, who never actually did it. And let's see what Mr. James looks like. Pull it up here. There you go. Fascinating looking gentleman. Let's open it in a new tab. Okay. Well, there he is in all his glory from the side position. Um, and here is a biographical history of England, the work we were just talking about. That'll open. Yeah. That's what it kind of looks like. Or there's a page from it. It's pretty much plain Jane, and there you go. Let's go back to Mr. Granger there for a moment. So extra illustrated versus Grangerized versus ruined. Quick vocabulary pass around the same page. Extra illustrated book, any book that now has more illustrations than it originally had. That can mean a few tasteful added plates or a full-on expansion into multiple volumes. Now, Grangerized book, usually used for the maximalist, Granger style version, lots of added or blank leaves, tons of inserted material, and often other books sacrificed for their plates. Now, scrapbooks or altered books, close cousins. Scrapbooks collage material without a main printed text. Altered books treat the book itself as a sculpted object. Modern craft people sometimes say Grangerized for any book art, but historically it's tied to the 18th to 19th century extra illustration mania. Critics talk about good ruined books versus bad ruined books. A good ruined book is the destruction that creates something uniquely valuable. Bad ruined book is destruction that doesn't give us enough to make up for its loss. So a little bit of perceived value there, and I'm sure there is internet arguments and in-person arguments galore on this matter. Grangerized books live uncomfortably right on that line, and we're going to take a look from Folgers here, or Folgerpedia rather. And we have a visual example. No. So they're claiming here that extra illustrated books are published texts that have been made into unique copy by a former owner through the permanent edition of prints, autographs, letters, etc. Particularly, the editions are mounted on additional leaves, and the book is rebound to accommodate its increased thickness. Extra illustrations primarily serve as visual and verbal annotations to the text rather than decoration. The extra illustrator identifies significant people, places, and things mentioned in the book, even if only mentioned in passing, collects related material, and adds its appropriate spot. I give some other examples, and I'll have links for a bunch of this stuff down in the description for you guys, but there you go. They mention on some of these cases how many books went in. We got 56 books here, 23, 42, 88. All right, so I think I have another example for us from the New Yorker. Good ruined books and bad ruined books. All right, New Yorker, what you got? We have any cool images? We do not. Okay. So just a little funsy article. Again, I'll have this down in the description. And I will note this section here. Not according to Grangerizers, these 18th century grown-ups who refused to digest James Granger's 1969 biographical history of England without pictures. Instead, they launched a movement to self-illustrate the book, inserting many portraits of the book's subject into the personal copies, handy placeovers to give their imaginations a rest. As the practice spread to other books and expanded in scope, a heavily Grangerized book could increase in size many times over. It became the subject of debate. Was Grangerizing an extra illustration, an exquisite handicraft, or merely breaking up a good book to illustrate a worse one? When it came to the inclusion of non-illustrated elements, playbill inserted into Romeo and Juliet, for example, was it ruining a book for the sake of personal recollection, or creating a paean to a rotten of a sentimental memory? Was it more scrapbooking than art? In the end, there are good ruined books and bad ruined books, and the quality depends greatly on the artist. It depends a bit too on the beholder, and though May, you can be one at the Folger Shakespeare Library in Washington, D.C., where an exhibit entitled Extending the Book, The Art of Extra Illustration follows the genius and the controversy of Grangerizing. It also provides instructions for how to Grangerize your own volumes, which means that you can toil over visually amending your copy of Pride and Prejudice with yourself as Lizzie, say, or Alida with your high school French teacher as Humbert Humbert. And then you can finally, after all the toil and all these years, and with the dignity of an independent adult, sit down with a glass of cereal milk and read a picture book. So there's a lot of controversy around this subject, but I think when it's done well, it's, well, done well. Um, how you actually Grangerize a book. 18th century do it yourself. Okay, let's say it's 1805 and you decide I would like at least one book-based black hole on my shelf. Here's your workflow. Pick your base text. You want something that begs for illustration, nationally and local histories, biographies and collected lives, travel narratives, and a topographical books, Shakespeare, the Bible, later big name authors like Byron and Dickens. Anything packed with people and places you can cast with images is essentially what you're going to want if you so choose to start Grangerizing yourself. And let's look at an extra illustrated local or country history from the Huntington Guide. And ta-da! Here we are. So let's see. Okay, here's the image. So we're going to open that up. And apparently I can make it even bigger. And I will. That's too big. Okay. So they got even little envelopes and little pullaways here. And I don't know if this piece on the left is added or not. If it was added, solid choice. But I do like the tactile involvement with these little letter opening things. They are pretty nifty. Um, yeah. So let's go back over here. So the next step you need to do is go hunting and pillaging like a Viking. Next, you become a print vampire. You scour cheaper, damaged illustrated books, portfolios or engravings, atlases and city views, playbills, broadsides, ticket stubs, letters, and autographs. As the hobby spread, books with good plates get bought just to be dismembered. Prices rise. Intact copies vanish. Bibliographers start grinding their teeth. So, plates removed from other books shown in the Duran example, and here we'll pull that up. Ta-da! A little small, but I think you guys get the idea. Make that a little bigger. Haha. So let's see here. Um, mhm. Let's see. They're noting the term extra illustrated refers to a book that has more prints or illustrations in it than when the book was published. These were usually added by trimming and tipping the prints onto extra pages or sometimes right on top of the text and then rebinding the original text pages with the new plates. Now, they're blaming the British here because they're saying the British term. Grangerizing has slightly different connotation stemming from James Granger's uh, biographical history of England, which was published with blank leaves already provided for the reader to fill with prints. Grangerizing became a popular hobby in England. Unfortunately, many other books were cut up to provide the extra prints for these homemade editions. So there's controversy. We're harming other books, and these books are kind of scarce, and we're destroying them for all time to produce a quote unquote work of art. Is that a good thing? And that's where the debate and controversy really hits home for a lot of people, as you are destroying books to alter in a permanent state another book, which may, some of its information may be lost. So if you practice this art form, well, yeah, you are destroying books in the pursuit of more art. So art becomes art. It is very interesting on a philosophical and ethical level to think about. And I'd love to know your opinions in the comments. So moving along. On step three, build the beast, which is interleaving and mounting. Now it's surgery time. You disbind the original book, shred it on up, insert new blank sheets the same size as the pages, mount or tip in prints, maps, and letters onto those leaves. Oversized items fold out. Letters might go in little pockets or be hinged so you can flip them open. Sometimes the text remains central. In other cases, the book becomes a print carnival with bits of text peeking through. Um, so we're going to take a look at an interleave volume where added leaves with prints sit between printed pages. Going back to the Folderpedia. We we've already looked at this a little bit, but yeah. See, that's exactly what they've done here and over here. Alrighty, moving on along. Um, so next is what we're gonna call rebind and balloon. Finally, you send the stack to a binder. We'll do videos on binders later. That is craziness in a good way. One volume becomes several. Slim Octavio becomes massive folio. A modest set now hogs an entire shelf. A properly Grangerized book should look like it's about to burst out of its bindings and demand a bigger house. We're going to take a look at the multi-volume extra illustrated set from the Hunting Illuminated Palaces. And pull that up. But and give us more than... Maybe it's still loading. Okay. Um, well, this is all we get. Thanks. Is there another page? Oh, that's disappointing. Anyway, we're gonna go on along. So now we're gonna go into famous Franken-Books, the greatest hits. Let's look at a few of the big ones. We've already mentioned the Bull-Granger, which is Richard Bull's extra illustrated copy of Granger's own biographical history of England, stuffed with thousands of portraits expanded into many volumes, essentially the final boss of Grangerizing. And I think we've already pulled this up. We'll pull it up again. Yeah, same wonderful length. I swear these are images that are just not loading, but okay. Moving on. You got Crowell's London. John Charles Crowell takes Thomas Pennant's History of London and blows it up into 14 folio volumes, adds 3,000 plus prints and drawings, turns one book into a sprawling visual history of London. And pull this up, and hopefully we'll have images this time, because that'd be cool. And we do. Open, open, open. Oh, we got lots of images. Yay. This kind of makes up for the lack of before. You got any more? No more. There's a bunch of bibliography stuff. Okay. So, oh, they didn't blow it up. They lied to me. Do I have to literally click what this says? Click. Okay. I guess I do. Gotta play by their rules. Thanks, ArcBook website. So yeah, as we can see, they pasted in, I guess, I don't think this is newspaper. I think this is from another text, and as is this. Pull this up. We got some handwritten things. Now, this looks pretty, whatever this is. Can I make this bigger? I can't. Look at me. All right. Uh, that's, I don't know what she's holding up there. Maybe it's a canvas? I don't know. Looks like we got some letters, some postcardy thingies, some cutouts. That's neat. What we got over here? Uh, just some more neat things. Okay. Oh, we got somebody from Rome over here from works of Shakespeare. What's this one? This one looks like a map. Kind of a map. Interesting. And over here we got this guy. Pretty neat. History of England. And that's all she wrote there. We'll leave the pretty one up while I go on for a minute. Alrighty. Then you have Oscar Wilde's Intentions or Beerbohm's copy at UCLA's Clark Library. There's a copy of it owned by Max Beerbohm. Beerbohm fills it with caricatures and drawings. The result is part essay collection, part visual rev, part fan edition. We're going to go over to the Clark Library blog showing extra illustrations of that. So moving on along. We were being transported. Okay. Now, be nice to me? Maybe not. Okay, they're gonna be nice. So let's open a bunch of these up and take a look at what we got. All right, make it a little bigger. Big, 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 big. Yeah, so we got a little drawing over here. We got this little addition here. I do like that image. It's kind of neat. And then we have, oh, a better representation of our drawing. What is he standing on? That's an art palette on a very slim pedestal. Okay, neat. So going on here. You also get huge suites like the Sutherland Extra Illustrated Books and nerdy monuments like the Asher B. Durand catalog at Princeton, where a straightforward reference book becomes an illustrated catalog because someone hunted down the actual prints and pasted them in. Durand catalog with inserted engravings at Princeton. And let's hope there's some pictures here. There's one. We get a whole one, maybe four. And open, open, and open. Okay. A little blurry, but that's okay. What we got over here? All right. We got this thing here. And that. All right. Let's go look at this one for a minute. So who did the work? Spoiler, it wasn't just rich guys. Not every Grangerized book was made by one gentleman in a smoking jacket. There was also professional studios. Early 20th century photos mention women like Carrie and Sophie Lawrence in New York working full time in a studio, inlaying prints, extra illustrating books for paying clients. A contemporary line in very period language calls prints, inlaying, and extra illustrations an ideal breadwinning pursuit for women, hinting at their gendered labor behind these deluxe volumes. Behind many of the big projects, there's also a whole micro industry, dealers sourcing material, binders engineering the structure, inlayers and assistants doing precise cutting and mounting. So when we say Crowell Grangerized this, what we often mean is Crowell paid a small team of very skilled people to do it. That's what that means. So we're going to take a look at Wishy Washy Studio, fantastic name, by the way, and it's a blog describing the Huntington exhibit and workshop labor. So pull this up. Ta-da. Okay. Oh, wow. That's great. Open. And open. And more open. Lots of examples. I love it. Okay, let's take a look. That is very, very pretty. I approve. We looked at this before in another website, so that's neat. That's really cool there. And we got a lady. Okay, lady. Beauty and the Beast. I like how he's a bear. That's great. We got these little side things here. And stamps. Lots of stamps. That's a clever idea because they're small and thin. And then I assume this is either a bindery or they're doing the inlaying themselves in-house. Got a couple ladies over here working hard. Lots of material. That's pretty neat. There's a little George Washington over there in the corner. All right. So why collectors loved it, it was just basically an analog hypertext. So from the collector's perspective, this isn't book crime, it's book nirvana. Why? Uniqueness. Your copy is a one of a one in the universe. It's the only one to exist. Status and connoisseurship, rare plates, louder flex. Your library says, I have excellent taste and very questionable restraint. Deep engagement. You're not passively reading, you're curating, deciding who gets a portrait, which scene deserves a map, what letter belongs next to what chapter. Analog hypertext, extra illustrated books function like a physical web, text, portrait, document, map, commentary, all bound together in a package. The universal book fantasy, everything relevant, early editions, later reenactions, maps, portraits, letters, clippings, pulled into one portable archive. The JSTOR Daily article, Grangerizing made beautiful books even better. And we're also going to look at Kathleen McCook's Substack, Extra Illustration Books, A Prelude to Wikipedia. So let's look at the first one I mentioned. And that looks like a better edition of our bear, which I think it is. Haha, bear. And I don't want to subscribe to your newsletter. I'm sure it's important, but not for me. And we got the stamp book we already took a look at, so that's neat. Now let's pull up the other article. Whee! Opening that up. Aha! Prelude to Wikipedia, which is pretty much kind of accurate, assuming all facts were checked. Grangerizers as villains. See, it's hugely controversial. It really is. Okay, I think that's all we're gonna get here. Let's blow that up a little bit for those watching on the YouTubes. I think that's an actual chain, maybe, or maybe it's a drawing of a chain. Can't really tell. And then we have this little devil with a billow over there. Neat. All right. So, why critics called it monstrous, plus a modern disclaimer. Of course, plenty of people absolutely hated this. Even in the 19th century, critics blasted extra illustrations as a monstrous practice, a contagious mania, a threat to survival of intact books. Because the math is brutal, one extra illustrated book often equals several other books mutilated or destroyed. Modern writers lean into the good ruin books, bad ruin books framing. If the result is historically rich or artistically brilliant, maybe the damage feels just barely justifiable. If not, you've just wrecked rare material for a vanity project. And I think both those claims are true. I really do. So Grangerized books force the question, is this devotion or is it book butchery? Realistically, it's a messy mix of both. Quick modern disclaimer. And this video gives you ideas. Please don't start slicing up rare 19th century first editions. If you want to play with this concept, use facsimiles, print-on-demand reprints, or modern editions. Save the irreplaceable stuff for future archivists. I agree. Please do this. Don't ruin old books. Now, if it's severely damaged and it's unreadable, that's a whole different story, and if you're able to salvage some images, go for it. All right. We're gonna look at good books and bad ruined books for a minute. You know, we're not, because they gave us no pretty pictures, and we've actually been here before. So let's look at an example of obviously trimmed plates, cannibalized material from a blog like Books Tell You Why. And no images. Okay, but let's see. What was the main thing I want to pull away from here? Yeah, I think this collecting bit's what I wanted to reference on this section. Make that small. The active extra illustration has drawn fire since the beginning. While proponents defended it as exquisite handicraft, detractors argued that it was breaking up a good book to make a worse one. At any rate, Grangerizing has produced some incredibly artistic works. Rare book collectors have found extraordinary volumes that contain everything from variant title pages, watercolors, and etchings to original drawings, manuscript pages, and mesotints. If you encounter a Grangerized book, it's important to consider a few factors. First, is it the quality of the original book? Is it as fine a volume or a cheap paperback? Next, consider the extra illustrations, which may be rare and valuable unto themselves. Finally, and perhaps more importantly, consider your personal interest in the work and the extra illustrations. If you added a Grangerized books to your collection, where did you find them, and what is the most extra illustration you have discovered? I mean, that's all fair. So, collectors actually like collecting these things because they are unique one-to-one copies. So, moving on along. How do libraries treat these Franken objects? Modern libraries have basically said, we're keeping the monsters, now we have to describe them. The Folger Shakespeare Library's Extending the Book exhibition shows how readers use portraits, letters, and documents to illustrate Shakespeare, not just with pretty pictures, but with evidence and commentary. So let's see if we can open that up here. I think we've already looked at this page, but we'll go back, because we can. Yeah, that's pretty. And I think they had another image on this page. Yep. Those here. Those here. Cool. Going on down to the Huntington showcases extra illustrated biographies and histories, asking whether this practice is intense love, destructive obsession, or both at once. So let's go over here, and we're going to head on to the Clark Library. Yep, I think this is pretty great. I think it adds a little value as long as we're not hindering the text. And going on to the Clark Library highlights Wilde's volumes and others were added drawings to turn a standard book into a collaboration between author and later reader. I believe we've been here as well, but you know what? We're going back. Haha. And catalogers have to treat these as hybrids, part published book, part unique manuscript. So they're often credited both the original author and the extra illustrating the collector in the record. So there's your claim to history right there. So Harvard Guide front page for extra illustration books. Go over there. Huzzah. That's kind of, well, it's not pretty, but unique. We got there. And scan card catalog. Okay. Pretty cool. Anything else Harvard wants to say to us? Scroll back up just for a second. Okay, here it is at the top. Of course, this was the top, not the bottom. I usually expect the information to be buried toward the bottom or middle. So, extra illustration or Grangerizing was a practice among book collectors from the late 18th to early 20th centuries, blah, blah, blah. So, for their example, in 1867, T.H. Morrill published a 4-volume edition of Joseph Ireland's records of the New York stage from 1750 to 1860. Theater manager Augustine Daly had his copy disassembled and rebound with wealth of material he collected over the years, extending it to 33 volumes. Opposite page 525 of Ireland's text, which mentions production of Open House, Dolly tipped in a playbill from the performance. Haha, a lot of work went into that. Moving on along, we're going to talk about scrapbooks, altered books, and 21st century echoes. A lot of scholars put scrapbooks, Grangerized books, and altered books on the same spectrum. 19th century readers kept scrapbooks of clippings and images. Others did that inside existing books, Grangerization. Modern artists cut, carve, fold, and collage books into sculpted work. Today, book artists turn old volumes into intricate sculptures and tunnels. Fans build their own deluxe editions with tipped-in maps, fan art, and ephemera. Digital projects like the Woman in White Grangerized edition ask people to add essays, annotations, and responses online, basically Grangerizing without the knife. Even TikTok has short explanators about Grangerized books, bringing this misreception into the scroll. So we're going to look at the Book Tells You Why blog again. Not much really to say, but just for reference there. And then we're going to go over to LitHub, the lost art of custom illustrating your favorite books. Loads. Look how they have all this stuff on the wall. Looks like there's a fun little video. And again, I'll have links for these down in the description. And oh, there's a new image we haven't seen before. That's kind of cool. I have one down here. Oh, it's the woman working. Cool. That's a good article, actually. Lots of cool images. All right. Women in White Grangerizing Project infos. I think that's the same image we were looking at here. His drip away could just make out his final words. Okay. Any cool? No, just pretty much a deep dive article. All right. I'll have it in the description just for your own. Okay, there we go. There's a visual. Open that up. But yeah, I'll have a link for this down in the description as well. And that's pretty neat there and there. Cool. All right, now we're going to look at the Wisconsin 1903 Extra Illustrating Commentary chapter. That is a mouthful. All right. And just I think just a neat little article. Cool. All right. And then finally, TikTok from Rebecca Romney explaining Grangerized books. Yep. Neat little lady there. I think she had, when I was doing some research on her, she has like several videos about Grangerizing, which is neat. We're just gonna fast forward in the video here a little bit. You get no audio because YouTube does not like the audio. Okay, there we go. That's neat. And anything else she wants to show us, or just more talky talk? Oh, there's one. Gray portraits. Cool. There's one in color. That's neat. And anything else? Or is that going to be it? All right, that's going to be it. Let's see if I can freeze frame on one of these illustrations. Ta-da. We'll do that. So, going on, we're going to end the screen share. Stop sharing. So, because of the controversy involved and rareness of older books, would you do this? I really want to know down in the description if you would. So, just a quick recap. James Granger publishes a biographical reference in 1769. His readers turn it into a template for hyper-customized mega illustrated books. Collectors spend decades cutting up other volumes to create these monstrous one-offs. Libraries now preserve them as part archive, part artwork, part crime scene. Now, again, I really do want to hear from you. Would you ever Grangerize a book if you could do it ethically, say with facsimiles or modern editions? Which book would you pick? What would you add? Maps, portraits, fan arts, letters, your own marginella? Drop your answer down in the comments. And if you enjoyed this dive into bizarre book history, hit like, subscribe, and send this to your most deranged book collector you know. If you want more deep cuts like this, how books are made, collected, abused, and adored, that's exactly the kind of stuff we dig into over at my book club, Book Shepherd World, over on Patreon. The link for that is also down in the description, so be sure to check that out. And sometimes the most interesting books on the shelf is the ones that have been taken apart and put back together again. Um, so I'm going to thank you for following us along. I know this video was a little long, but it is an important or interesting part of history at the least. And as always, keep on booking on.